She gave up her spot in line, and the millionaire saw in her what money could never buy. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? I really want to know how far these stories are reaching. And if you love intense, emotional love stories full of twists and turns, subscribe to the channel. That way, you can follow each new episode and help this project grow and reach more people. The clock read 4:47 p.m. on that stuffy April afternoon in Charleston. The bank was packed, the attendants were late, and the system, as usual, was down. In the line, impatient voices rose like a dissonant choir. But there, in the middle of a sea of tired faces, was a woman who seemed to belong to another world. Elena Cruz, 27 years old, looked flawless even in her simplicity. Her straight black hair flowed down her back like a shiny waterfall. Her light brown skin highlighted her honey brown eyes that carried a mix of sweetness and exhaustion. Her sculptural figure, effortlessly elegant, drew attention without her even trying. She wore a light blue blouse with a slight shimmer, well-fitted tailored pants, and simple flats. In one hand, she held a white envelope. It contained the emergency hospitalization documents for her mother, whose surgery depended on an advance payment. The line moved slowly. Each minute felt like an eternity. Sweat gathered on people's foreheads, tension hung in the air. That's when a tall, elegant man walked in, speaking on his phone with a firm tone. "Yes, I understand, Andrew. But if that contract isn't signed today, we lose the investor." He hung up and looked around. No privileges here. The line was the same for everyone. It was Bryan Bennett, 34, known in town as the heir to the most prestigious resort chain in the South. Tall, broad-shouldered, angular face. He wore a flawless charcoal grey suit, his well-groomed beard framing his sharp features. His greyish-blue eyes seemed cold and analytical, like someone who always had the world at his feet, until he stepped into that bank and saw that not even power could buy priority. Elena watched from the corner of her eye. Something about that man bothered her, and at the same time intrigued her. He looked at the line and sighed. He seemed desperate. She stepped forward gently. "Are you in a hurry?" Bryan looked at her, confused. "Sorry? You can take my place. I just need a receipt. Nothing urgent. Seems like you have something more important." He hesitated. No one ever did that for him without wanting something in return. "Are you sure?" She smiled softly. "Yes. Go ahead." Bryan thanked her with a nod, still suspicious. He walked past her, but his eyes went back. He looked at her more carefully. That woman didn't know who he was, and even so she gave up her spot. No arrogance, no expectations. On the other side of the counter, Elena was quickly attended to, but the system crashed completely. "Miss, I'm sorry. The payment can only be confirmed tomorrow." She held back her tears. Her mother needed the surgery in 2 days. Tomorrow might be too late. As she left the bank, the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky with golden and pink hues. Bryan was leaning against his luxury car, talking on the phone again. When he saw her, he ended the call. There was something about her he couldn't ignore. "Hey, line lady." She stopped, surprised. "I just wanted to say thank you. It was a tough day." Elena just nodded, with a restrained smile. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us that kindness still exists. And then she walked away, unaware that that simple gesture would plant the seed of something that would change her life forever. The sound of cars passed, muffled through the bank windows, and the murmur of the line echoed in slow motion in Elena's mind as she walked away with firm but heavy steps. The kindness she had shown felt small compared to the weight she carried in her chest. The system had crashed. The payment wouldn't be processed in time, and her mother, fighting a serious infection and needing emergency surgery, might not make it, if not admitted within the next 48 hours. She bit her lower lip, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. Not here, not in front of strangers, not while she could still stand tall. Outside, the sun had already hidden behind the magnolia trees lining Charleston's historic streets. A warm breeze ruffled her long, straight hair, but she didn't even notice. She was too deep in thought, searching her mind for a solution that didn't yet exist. Bryan Bennett, from across the parking lot, watched from afar. Still leaning against his imported black car, he had ended the call with his business partner just to watch her leave. That woman had something he couldn't explain, an aura of serene dignity, even amid the tension of the place. And she had been kind without knowing who he was, expecting nothing in return. That to him was rare, almost non-existent. He approached without thinking much, walked with determined steps, the sunlight reflecting off his brushed metal watch, his suit slicing through the breeze as if it were part of him. When he reached her, she was already about to turn the corner. "Line lady." She stopped slowly, turned around a bit, startled. "Yes?" Bryan looked at her up close for the first time. Her honey-brown eyes seemed even more intense in the golden light of the sunset. Her face was delicate, but there was strength there. He hesitated for a second. "I wanted to thank you for the spot in line. It was kind. That doesn't happen much." Elena nodded with a subtle smile, but her eyes betrayed her worry. "It was nothing. Sometimes someone's rush is more urgent than someone else's wait. You seemed to need it just as much as I did. And I did." She took a deep breath. "But not everything is solved by shouting or by stepping over others." Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was simply honest. Bryan fell silent for a moment. For the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being disarmed by simple words, or by someone who didn't flatter or fear him. "I'm Bryan," he said on impulse, as if that should mean something. She smiled again. "Nice to meet you, Bryan. I'm Elena." And then, before he could ask anything else, she turned and left. Her low heels tapped rhythmically against the sidewalk. She didn't ask for his card, didn't ask about his company, didn't even glance at the luxury car parked just behind. Bryan stood there for a few more seconds, watching until she disappeared among the people and colonial buildings. That woman, who barely knew who he was, had left something in him that not even the most lucrative deals could provoke: restlessness. At that moment he knew, with the clarity of someone who had lived long enough to recognize true rarities, that Elena Cruz was not like the others, and that somehow fate would bring their paths together again. The next morning, the sky over Charleston was gray, as if reflecting Elena's emotional state. After failing to make the payment at the bank, she had spent the night reviewing budgets, calling institutions, begging for extensions, all in vain. Her mother was still hospitalized, and the surgery scheduled for 2 days later now seemed like a distant hope. Tired, but with the poise of someone who didn't allow herself to break, Elena arrived at the hospital shortly before 7. She wore light linen pants, a white blouse, and a discreet navy blazer that highlighted her natural elegance. Her hair was down, straight as silk, gently falling over her shoulders. Her perfume was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unforgettable to anyone who passed by. At the front desk she typed names, answered phones, and smiled politely even when her heart felt heavy. She knew how to separate personal struggles from the duties of her job. At least, she tried. Across the lobby, the automatic doors opened for a small group of men in suits. Leading them, as always, was Bryan Bennett. He wore a petroleum blue Italian suit, his tie slightly loosened, beard trimmed to the perfect balance of care and masculinity. His grayish blue eyes scanned everything around him, but inside, his mind wandered. Since that brief moment in the bank line, he hadn't been able to forget that woman. Her beauty was striking, of course, but there was more. The calm look, the lack of interest, the way she treated him like just an ordinary man. That, to him, was rarer than any artwork in his collection. The hospital director greeted him enthusiastically. "Mr. Bennett, welcome. Shall we head to the conference room?" Bryan nodded, but his eyes, sharp and searching, scanned the room. Then he saw her. Elena was behind the counter, helping an elderly lady with kindness and patience. She laughed quietly at something the patient said, and the sound hit Bryan like a memory surfacing. He stopped in his tracks. That was her, the woman. From the line, the one who had touched him without knowing, the director noticed his pause. "Is everything all right, Mr. Bennett?" Bryan masked it. "Yes, I just need a minute." He discreetly stepped away from the group and walked toward the counter. Elena hadn't seen him yet. She finished the interaction, handed the papers over with a smile, and looked up, and their eyes met. She frowned slightly, surprised. "You..." Bryan gave a restrained smile. "Elena, right?" She nodded, unsure what to say. "You are..." "Bryan Bennett." He extended his hand, firm, but without arrogance. "I think I owe you another thank you for that day." Elena shook his hand, surprised by the warmth and confidence of his grip. "You're the man from the line, and the Bennett Hotel's heir?" "Guilty on both counts," he said with a crooked smile. Elena didn't know how to react. That changed everything. And at the same time, nothing. "I didn't know who you were, and honestly, I wouldn't have done anything differently." Bryan watched her in silence for a few seconds. "And that's exactly why I'm here." Before she could respond, the director reappeared, giving him a pointed look. Bryan nodded and said goodbye to Elena with a look that lingered a moment longer than necessary. As he walked away, she felt something strange, like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. As if that unlikely and unexpected reunion was the beginning of something much bigger than either of them imagined. And at that exact moment, without her knowing, Elena Cruz's name was added to the priority list of the hospital's new social project, sponsored by the Bennett Hotels. But he didn't want to help her. He wanted to know her. Elena spent the following days trying to ignore the strange effect Bryan's return had on her. It was as if his presence had left an echo in her memory, not just because of the power he clearly carried, but the unexpected way he had re-entered her life. Still, she stayed focused on her routine, as if work and silence could shield her heart. That cloudy Tuesday, the hospital was buzzing. A charity event was to be officially announced, with local press cameras, clinic directors, and a few members of Charleston's elite. Elena, although not part of the organizing team, had been asked to discreetly assist with guest reception. At exactly 2:45 p.m., Bryan entered the hospital once more, this time wearing a light gray suit with a navy blue tie. His beard was trimmed, his dark hair styled to perfection. He walked with the ease of someone who had never needed to rush. When he saw her, he didn't hesitate. He approached with a slight smile, but his gaze was serious. "Do you have a minute?" Elena hesitated. "If this is about the project, I think you should talk to management. It's not about the project, it's personal." He tilted his head subtly toward the hospital cafe. Minutes later, seated at a corner table, Bryan seemed to be searching for the right words. Elena watched him cautiously. She was as beautiful as ever. Her straight hair fell over her shoulders, contrasting with the white blouse and black pants she wore. She looked serious, but her natural sweetness remained untouched. "I need to ask you something unusual," he began. "You want me to work the event?" "No. I want you to pretend to be my wife for 7 days." Silence fell between them instantly. The world seemed to pause for a second. Elena blinked, not understanding. "Sorry, what?" It'll sound absurd, but my father included a ridiculous clause in his will. To secure my share of the hotels, I have to attend a week of events with a wife by my side. If I'm not married, I lose voting rights on the board. And you want me to pretend to be your wife? She said the sentence softly, almost laughing like it was a badly timed joke. Yes, just for 7 days. There won't be any physical involvement. No public affection if you're not comfortable. Everything will be under contract. You'll be paid for your time. Use it however you want. Or to help your mother. That last sentence hit Elena like a sharp blade. Her chest tightened. You looked into my life? No. I found out by accident through the hospital's list and the social project reports. Your name came up flagged for possible treatment suspension due to non-payment. I didn't want to use that against you. She immediately stood up from the table, eyes full of indignation. Then don't. It's not blackmail, he said quickly. It's a proposal. You're the only person I trust with this. The only one who didn't try to get close to me out of interest. I know I'm not easy to deal with, but I'm honest. Elena took a deep breath, her heart aching. She felt insulted and at the same time tempted. The amount he offered wouldn't solve all her problems, but it would secure her mother's treatment, clear the hospital debt, and give her at least 6 months of peace. 7 days, she said slowly, sitting back down. Written contract, no touching, no kissing, no intimate exposure, Bryan nodded. And you can back out any time, no explanation needed. But if you make it to the end, you'll receive double the agreed amount. She looked him in the eye. You have no idea what you're getting into. He smiled slightly. I think I know exactly. By late afternoon, the contract was delivered by a trusted attorney. Elena read every clause carefully. Her hands trembled as she signed, but her expression remained steady. For her mother, she would do whatever it took, even if it meant spending a week pretending to be the wife of a man who carried as much mystery as he did wealth. What she didn't know was that neither of them would come out of this charade the same as they went in. The Whitmore mansion, located on the outskirts of Charleston, looked like something out of an old movie. Surrounded by white columns and symmetrical gardens, it exuded tradition and power. It was there that the first night of the charity events was taking place, where Bryan was expected to show up with his wife at his side. And on that early evening, the woman beside him turned heads and silenced rooms wherever she passed. Elena stepped out of the limousine with the grace of someone born into that world, even if she didn't belong to it. She wore a dark blue silk gown with a soft, open back and a subtle shimmer that highlighted every curve of her sculpted figure. Her straight hair was styled in a low bun with a few loose strands framing her delicate face. Her makeup was subtle, enhancing the honey brown eyes that looked even more intense under the soft entrance lights. Bryan, beside her, wore a tailored black suit with a burgundy tie. His usually impassive gaze was different that night. He was no longer the same calculating businessman. He was a man intrigued because the woman he had hired to play a role was beginning to shine brighter than any truth in his life. You look stunning, he said as they walked toward the ballroom. Elena smiled lightly, maintaining her poise. I just hope I look convincing. You look too real. His words caught her off guard for a moment, but she looked away without commenting. The main hall was crowded. Businessmen, philanthropists, local politicians, and high society figures mingled with glasses in hand and rehearsed smiles. But as soon as Elena entered beside Bryan, the chatter died down. All eyes turned to the couple. Is that her? A wife, they whispered. Who would have thought so different from the others? But Elena held her head high. She spoke with confidence, listened attentively, and when questioned, responded with intelligence and grace. Within minutes, She earned sincere compliments from influential women and sideways glances from others less willing to accept her presence there. The only one who didn't hide her contempt was Bryan Bennett, Bryan's aunt, a woman with a rigid posture, perfectly pinned silver hair, and eyes cold as ice. "Bryan," she said as she approached with a cutting smile, "finally decided to introduce us to your wife." Elena extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." Vivian didn't shake it. She merely looked her over, like assessing a counterfeit piece. "Interesting choice, dear. I hope your father's will is worth it," Bryan replied firmly, his face tense. "She's more than you'll ever understand, Aunt." Then he walked away with Elena, not waiting for a response. On the far side of the ballroom, a man watched everything with an analytical expression. It was Peter Langston, the Bennett family's lawyer for over 20 years. Nothing escaped his trained eyes. And there was something about that woman, something in the way she avoided Bryan's touch in public, in her cautious look, in the almost rehearsed way she smiled in photos. On the third night of events, during a private dinner, with investors at a historic vineyard, Elena even won over the skeptics. She made insightful comments about the hotel chain's social projects, and without realizing it, began to stand out on her own merit, not just as Bryan's companion. He watched her from a distance, leaning against an old stone column. Elena chatted with a couple of philanthropists like she belonged there, and for the first time, Bryan wondered if he had truly hired someone to pretend, or if fate had placed this woman in his life for a much greater reason. On the ride back that night, he stared at her for long seconds in the silence of the limousine. "You never stop surprising me." She looked at him sideways with a faint smile. "Maybe you're confusing what you hired with what you found." "Maybe," he murmured, eyes never leaving hers. But outside, as the limousine pulled away, Peter Langston was quietly typing a message on his phone. "She's not who she says she is. I'm almost certain the marriage is a facade." And at that moment, an invisible tension began to build. While inside the car, Elena closed her eyes for a moment, unaware that the luxurious world she was dazzling in would soon demand a price far too high. The Bennett Hotel ballroom, lit by crystal chandeliers and adorned with velvet and discreet gold, pulsed with the sophistication of a gala night. The soft music of a string quartet filled the air, while guests paraded their polished smiles, glasses sparkling under the warm light. It was the penultimate night of the week of events, the most anticipated, the most exposed. Elena, once again, was flawless. The black satin dress hugged her body with elegance and allure. A modest open back and a strand of real pearls highlighted the classic beauty of her features. Her long, straight hair was loose, with soft waves at the ends. She walked among the guests with a lightness that defied the world she belonged to, or pretended to. Bryan watched her from afar, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He wore a black tuxedo with satin details and an expression his eyes couldn't conceal. Something inside him was beginning to break, because by now he no longer saw her as a temporary hire in a convenient agreement. And that night, when he saw her smile, not at him but at another man, the crack became inevitable. Elena had been invited to dance by Matthew Delancey, a young, influential businessman clearly taken with her. He was charming, but his interest wasn't subtle, and the way he held her waist during the waltz made Bryan's blood boil. He said nothing, just watched, but his clenched jaw and tight grip on the glass betrayed his silent jealousy. When the music ended, Elena thanked Matthew politely and stepped away. As she returned toward the table, she sensed his presence before seeing him. Bryan approached with a hard stare and low voice. "Can we talk now?" Without waiting for an answer, he walked toward the hallway near the service wing. Elena, caught off guard, followed him. The door shut behind them. The muffled sound of the gala disappeared, replaced by the heavy silence of the corridor. "Want to tell me what that was?" he fired, turning to face her. "It was a dance, Bryan," she answered, trying to stay calm. "A dance? That looked like anything but innocent." She lifted her chin. "Did you forget what our deal is? I'm not your real wife. I'm not your property." "It's not about property. It's about respect." "Respect?" Elena let out a short laugh. "I've respected you every step of this charade. You're the one who seems to be forgetting the terms." They stared at each other for a few seconds too long. There was tension, indignation, desire. "So that's it?" she said, her voice low. "You're jealous?" Bryan didn't respond. He just stepped closer. She instinctively backed up, pressing against the cold marble wall. Her heart pounded, her eyes locked on his. "You're confusing things." "Bryan, maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe I'm finally seeing everything clearly." And then, without another word, he kissed her. It was an urgent, intense kiss, born from the anger and desire they'd both been denying for days. For a moment, Elena responded, as if something locked inside her had finally broken free. But she quickly pulled away, turning her face breathless. "That shouldn't have happened," she whispered, eyes full of doubt. He looked at her, equally shaken. "You're right." Without another word, Elena walked out of the hallway in quick steps, avoiding all eye contact. Bryan remained there, leaning against the wall, breathing heavily as if the world had shifted off its axis. The next day, the silence between them was palpable. During the entire brunch with investors, they exchanged only formal phrases. No eye contact, no gestures beyond the necessary. But something had changed. Because after that kiss, the contract was no longer a safe boundary. It was just a thin line, on the verge of being crossed again. The silence between Elena and Bryan lingered. In the days following the kiss, during the remaining events of the week, they played their roles for the media with precision. But behind the scenes, everything felt suspended in the air. Neither dared mention what had happened in that hallway, nor what couldn't be undone. It wasn't until Monday morning that the storm hit. Elena arrived at the hospital as usual, with her straight hair down, light makeup, and a pale pink dress that contrasted with her tired face. She was determined to return to her routine. She needed it to remember who she was, to protect herself from everything she had felt in the past few days. But as she walked through the lobby, the looks that followed her were different. Some turned away. Others stared with barely disguised disdain. A group of nurses whispered while holding their phones. She felt her stomach twist even before seeing the headline. On the phone left on the reception desk, the screen displayed the article, "The Heir's Fake Wife, Elena Cruz's Hidden." This young woman, who allegedly seduced Bryan Bennett, used to work as a paid escort for events. Sources suggest the relationship is a scheme to secure control over the hotel empire. The article featured photos of Elena at gala dinners, accompanying businessmen, always elegant, but now twisted into scandal. Cruel comments flooded social media. Most were misogynistic, unfair, cruel. "She's a gold digger, just went after Bryan for money. Another opportunist in an expensive dress. How does someone like that even work in a hospital?" Elena's blood ran cold. Her breath caught, her heart raced. Her hands trembled, but she didn't cry, not yet. The hospital coordinator called her into the office with a pained look. "Elena, for now, we think it's best if you take a step back, not out of judgment. But the exposure is affecting the environment, and donors are pressuring us." "I didn't do anything wrong," she replied firmly, her eyes wet. "I know, but we can't control this now." Leaving through the side door, with her bag in hand and her soul in pieces, Elena tried to breathe. She felt like the world was laughing at her, that all the effort to preserve her dignity, the sacrifice for her mother, the silent deal she had made with fate, it was all being trampled. That same afternoon, sitting on a bench in an empty park, she waited for a call, a message, a sign, but Bryan didn't show, didn't say a word. She saw his face featured in an online interview later that day. When asked by the press about the rumors, he simply said, "I'd rather not comment on personal matters at this time." That was the final blow. When night fell over Charleston, Elena packed the small suitcase she kept in her room and left the apartment she had rented with great effort. She told no one, just left a note for the neighbor asking her to take her mother's prescription to the hospital as soon as possible. Before leaving, she looked one last time at the city that, in a few days, gave her a taste of the impossible, and then cruelly ripped it away. "I was foolish to believe," she whispered to herself, staring at the overcast sky. "To believe I could be loved, just as I am." But what Elena didn't know was that someone had heard everything from a distance, from inside a dark car discreetly parked on the corner. Bryan Bennett had arrived too late to stop her from falling, but maybe he still had time to find out who pushed her. Elena's silence became an unsettling presence in Bryan's life. The days after her departure were the longest he'd lived since his father's death. Her absence wasn't just noticeable, it was unbearable. The apartment felt colder, the work more mechanical, and social events painfully empty. None of the women who approached with calculated glances carried the quiet glow or the gentle strength Elena had in her eyes. It was strange. He had everything, and yet he had nothing. Nothing. "You're quieter than usual," said Andrew, his assistant, walking into the meeting room. Bryan just flipped through a dossier with no focus. "I need to know who leaked that information to the press." Andrew looked surprised. "You're still thinking about that?" She was humiliated, lost her job, and I was a coward. The assistant hesitated before speaking. "Do you really want to know who did it?" "I didn't ask out of courtesy, Andrew." That same afternoon, Bryan hired a private investigator, one of the best in the state. It didn't take long for the truth to surface, and what he found hit him like a punch. Bryan Bennett, his own aunt. She had discreetly hired a journalist known for society scandals. The article was bought, old images of Elena at events manipulated, and online comments boosted by bots to spread the scandal. All because, according to emails intercepted by the investigator, Bryan believed a woman without pedigree would put the Bennett legacy at risk. Reading those files made Bryan's blood boil. He stared at the laptop screen as if he could burn the words written there, his jaw clenched, fists tight. The following night he went to the family mansion. Bryan was in her garden, overseeing the pruning of the rose bushes as if nothing had happened. She wore a beige linen dress and modest jewelry. When she saw him, she smiled coolly. "Bryan, what a surprise." "Spare me the act," he said in a low, sharp voice. "You destroyed the only woman who was ever real with me." She calmly set down the pruning shears. "I protected you, dear. I protected the family name. That girl, she has no background. You were being deceived." "Deceived?" He laughed bitterly. "She was the only one who never asked for anything. The only one who looked at me like a man, not a walking bank account." Bryan looked at him with superiority. "You'll thank me one day. You always do." "Not this time." Bryan turned to leave, but before he did, he added, "Consider this the end. I'm done with this charade, with the board, with the family. Keep your golden last name, I'll keep the truth." He walked away without looking back. The next morning, he was ready to fix his mistake. With the help of the same investigator, he found out that Elena had stayed for one night at a modest inn 2 hours away, but had already left. She had left only a note for the receptionist. "Tell anyone who asks that I'm fine and that I don't want to be found." Those words hit him harder than any headline, because now he wanted to find her. He wanted to hear her voice, ask for, Forgiveness. Say that what began as a deal had become something real. Bryan returned to his car, parked in front of the small inn surrounded by trees. He took a deep breath and looked out at the cloudy horizon. You can hide from me, Elena, but you won't erase me from your story or mine. The car engine started. The search for her had just begun. It had been 3 months, 92 days, since Elena Cruz had left Charleston behind, with a wounded heart, pride in pieces, and hope wrapped in silence. She started over in Greenville, a smaller town where no one knew her. With the help of an old college friend, she got a job as an esthetician in a new clinic specializing in women's wellness and self-esteem. At first, she cleaned rooms and organized schedules. Gradually, she began seeing clients again, with the same gentle touch as always, but now with an emotional shield even she didn't fully understand. The pain became armor, and the armor became routine. On the morning of the clinic's official opening, a small event was set up with modest decorations, white flowers, light wooden panels, and hanging lights that warmed the space. The room filled with women from the community, local influencers, and even a reporter from the town's radio station. Elena wore a white linen dress, her straight hair down, light makeup, and a quiet smile. She looked beautiful, strong. But inside, there were still questions time hadn't answered. "You're giving the closing speech, right?" asked the clinic manager, excited. Elena nodded, taking a deep breath. Outside, as soft music played in the background, a black car quietly pulled up to the curb. The driver opened the rear door, and with determined steps, Bryan Bennett stepped out. He wore a light blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves, dark dress pants, and no suit jacket. For the first time, he wasn't the CEO. He was just a man who had lost something that money couldn't replace. The clinic staff stirred upon seeing him walk in, but Elena hadn't noticed yet. She had her back turned, arranging some boxes at the reception desk. When she turned around, the world froze for a moment. Their eyes met, and her heart raced. He hadn't changed. He still had that same intensity in his gaze. But now, there was something new, vulnerability. The room went silent as he walked to the center of the space. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "I know this is an event to celebrate new beginnings, and I wasn't invited, but I had to be here." Elena stood frozen, eyes wide, unsure of what to say. Bryan continued, "Months ago, I lost someone I should never have let go. She was wronged, exposed, humiliated, and I stayed silent, out of fear, out of cowardice. Today, I'm here not as a businessman, not as an heir to anything. I'm here as a man who loved too late, but still chooses to love." The silence was total. Everyone's breath seemed suspended. He stepped forward. "Elena Cruz, you taught me what no family legacy ever could. You showed me the value of dignity and truth. And even if you never forgive me, I had to say this in front of everyone." Elena felt her eyes fill with tears. She took a deep breath. Her body wanted to run, but her heart was still there. An older woman in the crowd, unable to hold back her emotion, started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. The small town of Greenville witnessed not a dramatic plea, but a true act of vulnerability, and no one doubted it. Elena approached, hesitant, her chest tight. She stopped in front of him. "Why did you come?" she asked, voice low. "Because there's no peace anywhere if you're not in it." She closed her eyes for a moment, tears running down her cheeks. She didn't say anything. She just rested her forehead on his chest and felt Bryan's arms wrap around her as if they never wanted to let her go again. The whole town applauded. But for them, in that moment, only the silence mattered. The next morning dawned calm in Greenville. The sky, still overcast, reflected the whirlwind of emotions Elena was trying to sort out inside. After Bryan's public gesture, his unexpected declaration, and the embrace that silenced every eye in the room, she had spent the night awake. Not because she doubted what she felt, but because of what she would have to face if she let herself feel again. On the porch of the small house she was living in, she sipped black coffee, wearing an oversized cotton shirt and her hair loose in the breeze. The sound of birds filled the quiet until it was broken by slow footsteps. Bryan appeared in the distance, wearing dark jeans and a rolled-up shirt, holding a bag with 2 coffees and a sweet roll wrapped in paper. His expression was soft but tense, like he knew this moment would be harder than any boardroom battle. "I brought your favorite," he said, stopping in front of her. "No." Sugar, strong, and with hope. Elena smiled but didn't answer. She took the coffee gently, meeting his eyes before speaking. "Yesterday was beautiful," she said plainly, "but it doesn't change everything." Bryan nodded, not defending himself. "I know. You left me alone. When the world turned on me, you hid behind silence, and now you show up and expect one gesture to fix it all. I don't expect that. I just want you to know that the man you saw yesterday is who I've wanted to be from the start, but I had to lose you to find him." Elena looked down. "I'm not a project to be rescued, Bryan. I don't want to be protected or kept or defended in silence. If I stay, it has to be as your partner, your equal, or nothing." He took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, smiled with his eyes. "Then let's start from nothing, from zero." She looked at him, surprised. "What does that mean?" "It means I have an entire floor available in one of the hotels. I want to turn that space into something of ours, an accessible aesthetics clinic for real women, with soul like you." Elena's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I left the board, remember? I don't have to pretend to be the perfect heir anymore. I just want to build something that matters. And if it's with you, even better." She laughed, tears in her eyes. "And what are you going to call it? Roots?" "No," he replied, gently holding her hand. "We'll call it Cruz, because it was your name that saved me from mine." That morning, under the soft breeze of South Carolina, they decided not to go back to what they had, but to create something new. No contracts, no masks, no need to prove anything to anyone. And when Bryan pulled her close and rested his forehead against hers, Elena closed her eyes, because for the first time, she was exactly where she chose to be. She chose to be. A year had passed since that coffee on the porch. Since the choice, since the real beginning, the Cruz Aesthetics Clinic was already a success. Located on the renovated ground floor of a former Bennett hotel, it offered affordable treatments for women of all ages, backgrounds, and stories. Their beauty was a tool for reclaiming self-esteem, not a luxury for the few. Elena led the team with kindness and strength. Bryan, though no longer part of the business elite, was involved in everything, not with the eyes of a boss, but of someone who had learned to serve before leading. The couple's story, once the target of scandals, was now a symbol of resilience. And that autumn morning, in a special interview for South Living magazine, Bryan sat before a journalist who had followed his journey since his days as a shielded heir. The setting was simple. A wooden bench beneath an orange-leaved tree in Greenville's Central Park. Bryan wore jeans, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his hair a bit messier than usual. His grey-blue eyes, once cold, now held peace. "Chicha, I asked the question everyone's dying to know," the reporter said with a smile. "How did you find love?" He looked at the camera, thoughtful for a moment. Then he spoke without holding back. "I saw in her what money can't buy, courage, kindness, and dignity, and I almost lost it, out of fear." The reporter was visibly moved, But Bryan continued, Elena didn't try to impress me. She didn't want anything from me. She gave me her spot in line when I needed it the most, and neither of us even realized it. That simple gesture changed everything. That's where the story began, not with promises, but with an act of generosity. Do you believe love changed your life? It didn't just change it. It revealed who I really was, beneath the name, the inheritance, and the arrogance. Love stripped me of pride and coldness. Elena taught me how to live without armor. The camera cut to images of the clinic, women coming and going with smiles, Elena attending to them gently, wearing a white coat embroidered with just her name, Elena Cruz, no family surnames, no shields, just her. Outside, Bryan watched her through the window with the same look he had the first time he saw her dance. But now, he admired not her beauty, but the quiet strength she had carried from the beginning. The reporter wrapped up the interview with one final question. If you could leave a message for someone who believes they've lost everything, what would it be? Bryan smiled, looking down for a second before lifting his eyes to answer. Sometimes, one small act of kindness can change an entire destiny, and only true love reveals who we are, beyond contracts, titles, and appearances. Love, when it's real, doesn't need to be bought. It needs to be earned. On the final screen, in white letters over an image of Elena and Bryan walking hand in hand through the park. Because in the end, it wasn't about wealth, power, or prestige. It was about someone who gave up their place in line and showed that sometimes it's in the simplest gesture that the truest love begins. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and let me know which part moved you the most. If this story touched your heart, like the video, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Before you go, I've picked another emotional story that will touch you even deeper. I'm sure it'll surprise you. Just click and continue this journey with us.